Euripidés were claw aquatic scorpions. Their bodies consist of numerous segments with pairs of legs that functioned as oar-like swimming organs. One fossil of a Euripidé was found in New York, and it was 10 feet long. Now, rocks of Antarctica, South America, Southern Africa, India, and Australia contain evidence of widespread glaciation in the southern hemisphere around 500 million years ago. And between 500 and 480 million years ago, large-scale extinctions occurred as life forms died out because they were incapable of integrating and using the incoming energy to create change and mutation. Some 92 categories of sponges became extinct. And after this, Australia had only bacteria and a few categories of sponges. The northern hemisphere had only trilobites, Eurypterids, and graptolites. Now, graptolites were a form of cuttlefish, snails, squids, octopus, etc. Now, the glaciations did not affect most of the southern hemisphere, and geochronologists state that blue-green algae, bacteria, and echinoderms in the southern hemisphere thrived and flourished around 470 million years ago. Now, the little wormfish conodonts were worldwide in distribution around 500 million years ago, when fish and Euripidés evolved. But around 450 million years ago, conodonts in northern Europe became different from those in other locations. And by 430 million years ago, conodonts disappeared from northern Europe because, number one, trilobites fertilized the eggs of conodonts and whales, and arthropods, or the insects, appeared. Around 400 appeared. Then aquatic scorpions and millipedes spread from whales through much of Europe, and graptolites also fertilized the eggs of conodonts, and cephalopods appeared. The nautilus, right here. He belongs in the octopus and the squid family, and he appeared. When the trilobites fertilized the eggs of conodonts, and I think the cuttlefish. Did the cuttlefish appear then? Brachiopods were living in waters from Europe to New Zealand around 430 million years ago. But they disappeared as their eggs were fertilized to create new cephalopod categories such as the cuttlefish and the horseshoe crab and many near octopus and near squids. Some of the near squids were 30 feet long. Now this is that cuttlefish. It first appeared 430 million years ago. Now, the insects, all of these are things that these trilobites from Australia, the ones with no, the reflections, all of them were predators and meat eaters. Insects were the first terrestrial or land-living life forms. They appeared in northern Europe around 425 years ago. Most were centipedes and spiders. Now, gaseous spirits 25 million years ago and created an arc of volcanism that stretched from Australia to Tasmania and initiated a period of mountain building. Niagara Falls was created at that time. Now, the shallow sea spread over a wide portion of the northern hemisphere, but glaciers were forming in Siberia. Now, agnatha jawless fish are ostracoderms. An encyclopedia passage says that they became particularly abundant in formations of Europe and North America around 421 to 387 million years ago. Now, ostracoderms had bony armor, internal bony areas also, but most of it was on the outside. And that armor arose in response to the need to escape those clawed invertebrate Euripidés. That's these things. Okay, so they evolved some bony armor. Now, I always think of this part as some little fish going off to war. Now, the heavily armored jawless fish concentrated in the Baltic area and in the old red sandstone rocks, especially in the Welsh borderland and Scottish area, where those conodonts had disappeared around 10 million years earlier. Around 420 million years ago, the jawless fish went there and fertilized the eggs of the giant Euripides. They waited 10 million years and then they went back and fertilized their eggs. And lampreys and hagfish appeared. Now, lampreys and hagfish are predators. They have a brain, nervous system, and armor. The lampreys have a disc of wrasse-like teeth. They attach themselves to a prey and parasitically feed on its blood and tissues. Now, hagfish are long. They're about 16 to 32 inches. They're still around, too. Now, they usually burrow down into the seafloor with their tails, and they just leave their head protruding to sense a prey. And then when there's something comes along, they bore their way inside, and they eat from the inside out, leaving just the shell. Now, these jawless fish fertilize so many of this creature's eggs that, and bred those lampreys and hagfish that they used up so many minerals that Scotland rose above the water. It became, lighter weight. Now, lampreys and hagfish patrolled the waters of northern Europe around 400 million years ago. And the heavily armored jawless fish concentrated in the Baltic Shield area, that's around Germany. And insects and trilobites were largely in the Soviet, where they were widely distributed. Now, some forms of trilobites were up to 2 feet long. Now, at that time, the equator ran from California to Labrador and from Scotland to the Black Sea region. The North Pole was in the Pacific region, the South Pole was in Central African Republic. Now, what are the poles of the Earth? There were no poles of the Earth prior to the evolution of the fish. The Earth was a water world. It was bombarded by chaotic mixtures of light rays from the cosmos. But the poles formed as fish and non-predatory life forms of the southern hemisphere began to concentrate radiations of light from stars of the Milky Way, whereas predatory life forms of the northern hemisphere, these trilobites and things, concentrated radiations of light from the North Polar Star. Remember that formed with the methane sun, or the methane explosions. Now, the climate was warm around 400 million years ago, with uniform temperatures from western Canada to the Ukraine and Siberia, and locally to Australia. Significant uplifting of mountains and erosion was occurring in Scotland, Greenland, and the eastern and southern parts of the United States. Now, fish were breaking down this Euripides primitive structure, and they were evolving the predatory energies of Earth in those regions by merging with these giant Euripides. That's a hard word to say, but these giant things right here. Okay, now geologists state that copper was deposited in Norway and the Appalachian regions. Copper transmits electricity or waves. So, land plants spread in the region. Rich forests of land plants grew in New York and drove oxygen levels near optimum, or the most favorable level for the evolution of air-breathing terrestrial forms. Okay, most biologists think that all the fish that concentrated in the Baltic region, they think that must have been some kind of migration center. But 4 new categories of fish evolved in the Baltic region as the jawless fish kept merging with the eggs of this thing. All 4 categories were descendants of the jawless fish. First was the ray-jawed fish. Then came raidfish, then came placoderms, and then came sharks. Now, jawed fish are freshwater predators with large eyes.